So basically it starts with the Biodynamics Decoded book, and that was me just trying to get things into order and you know, find out how these things sort of fit together. And I was thinking last night, one of the things that came out of this was that, you know, the BD preps are the planetary activity that's sitting across here. And what we've been talking a lot about is these 4 preps, the clay, the sand, the humus and the lime, which fit here. And when we come to Greg Willis's work and we start looking at that idea that bentonite clay, horn bentonite clay, is a middle prep, then what have we got on either side of that? And we can, he did a horn basalt and he did a horn sulphur. And so in a sense we have those preps there, and we have 501 and 500 here, and across the top here we can sort of put in the cell salts. So what that means is that we actually have a series of preparations for every layer of this game. And at one point I did make a product of that. I didn't have this layer, but I had all the other layers in there. So that's, you know, one of the features of this is that there's all these preparations that we actually have available that we can use, let's put it that way. So this was the first book, and it took 10 years. But it's interesting that, you know, Shane said he really likes this, and a friend of mine just the other day we were talking, and she's an art therapist, and she said, oh, that first picture you did, that's the one that I really like the most, and you could live with that for your whole life, you know. And so it was like, oh, okay, rightio, pull that out, you know. So,
about page 12 or 14?
20, 21. And the idea of all these, of course, they're meant to be at least A3 posters, and you put them on the wall, put them in your toilet, and you just look at them. You know, they're all about just referencing, and you think about it, and you come back and you sort of go, oh yeah, right, got that, and you think about it. And in a way, that's what all of these are. I did them for myself, and they're thought forms. There's just looking at the thought process and how it unfolds and moves, but yeah, ideally, you know. And one day I was thinking, you know, I'd like to blow them all up and actually have them as an art show, you know, in a gallery somewhere. Yeah, an exhibition of them. So that's the first book. And as I say, it's in my website, the Glenopathy website, in the book section there. And then I sort of moved to this book here. And so there's a bit of introduction in there, you know, just trying to give a basis. And then it was just the process I went through, you know, one step after the other, looking and observing. And so it just tells that story. And there's another stage to this whole story, which I don't know whether we'll get there or not, but it's called alchemical chemistry. And that I find really interesting, powerful, and, you know, really good. So we go through that and so on. So that's that book that brings us up to date, as it were. And this Nature Stories is Rudolf Steiner's text. You know, I wrote all sorts of articles for years and no one took any notice of them, and so I wrote a commentary on the agriculture course and no one took any notice. And so I then re-edited the agriculture course and put it into a book called Energetic Activities, and no one took any notice. And so I thought, okay, I'll just use Steiner's text, you know. It's his words. So I sort of organised, there's probably 20 different lectures that I've organised into a sort of sequential order. And, you know, the idea is this plant story that we did this morning, and then just working into all of the literature about these, what I call the physical formative forces, the cosmic forces, cosmic substance, earthly forces, earthly substance. It's a language that is not really very present in biodynamics, but it is the language of the agriculture course. And so it's sort of like, well, here you go, here's all that text, and here's a few other lectures talking about it as well. And, because I believe we need to get that language established.
Is it easy to read?
Well, it's Steiner, But the way to read Steiner, astrologically, he's a Pisces person with this Mercury-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, unaspected to anything else. And so he talks in pictures. And you've got to be able to sit there and sort of let that picture develop. And the more you just sort of... And he's quite frustrating in some places because they'll tell the story and then he comes straight back and he just tells the story again and adds a little bit on. And then he comes back and tells the story again and adds another little bit on, And he'll do that 6 times in a lecture, sort of... And I'd love to just come through and pull all that out and just have the endings, and just... But we've got to get it that he was more than likely channeling all this stuff. And so he's talking about a specific moment, a specific context, and he uses a specific language in that moment, but he's painting a picture. And if you can sort of sit in the picture and sort of watch it, you'll get it.
See, he even says in his writing of his books, he says, I write in a particular way on purpose because it is in order to develop something in you. It's like that whole, how do we see the other worlds? If you want to see the other worlds, you have to start thinking and seeing in a particular way. So that's the way I write is to try and influence you to do that.
Yeah, and there's 5,000 lectures. Apart from the books, which are much more in a spontaneous sort of manner. So anyway, so this is actually all Steiner's texts about those 4 activities and, agriculture course, but also other. There was at least 3 other lectures that I got that all talk the same language. And then there's these other ones that the same story but a different language. So I think this is a really important book, and just because it puts the story in order, and what I've done is edit the text so that it's a coherent language, and as I said earlier on, it clarifies which force is he talking about actually at any one time. And once it was quite interesting, and okay, I believe I had Lily Kalisko whispering in my ear, but it became incredibly clear. It was simple to go through and just add these words because it was just so obvious that it had to be said there, So anyway, I think that's really important. Now, this is just a book of essays that Steiner made this comment about equisetum, that we'll understand equisetum if we understand how it works on kidneys in humans. And so, okay, where's that? So I researched that, and so looked through all the medical lectures. Well, of course now, because we've got the Rudolf Steiner archive, you just put a word in, and that's what I did with this book, plant. I just, one day I went, oh, see what he said about plants. And so I just put in plant and up comes all these lectures and you just look through and so there's 20, 25 lectures or whatever. And so I printed them all off and put them into order and, and the same here. I just put in equisetum and so everything he said about equisetum just comes up. And so you just get all those. And I've got those texts in here in that article because every time he's just talking a little different. Every time. It's just this little bit different. And so people were liking that. I was getting feedback that they liked that article. So I did that, and then I did this one on the 3 worlds, which I've been working on in various ways for years. So I thought I needed to put that together. And the other thing that's happening in biodynamics is physical and etheric gets a lot of, the etheric gets a lot of focus, and there's a whole school that just talk about ethers. And the thing was, the agriculture course actually wasn't made public until 1976. So it wasn't until that time that we could actually look and see what he actually said. And once you read the agriculture course, there's all this stuff about the Australity, because Gunther Wachsmuth, of course, nothing in his book about the ethers. There's nothing about the Australity, and we get the course, and that's all it's about. As I said, it's about balancing nitrogen. It's about containing nitrogen. So the whole course is about how we control the Australity, and we've got this whole school of biodynamics that don't even talk about it. And so we sort of, people like me who aren't aligned to the Anthroposophical Society come at this from a new angle and going, well, there's plenty about Australity in here, And so that has become part of the conversation in recent years. And so now we talk about etheric and astral, but what's happening about the spirit? And what we hear is the spirit is the farmer, the individuality that's, keeping the order of the farm. Nature doesn't care about you, you're irrelevant to nature, really. And so there's this question of, where's the spirit in our biodynamic story apart from the farmer? And as we can see in all those texts, there's those golden balls down the bottom of the plant, and there's this cosmic silica stream going up the plant. This is all the spirit. And so, so there's an article there on the spirit in biodynamics. And so I just go through every layer of the game and how we're seeing the spirit in every layer of the game. So that's my own fanaticism a wee bit there. And then I sort of had a bit, the book was only that fat, and I thought, oh, that's not good enough. And so I've been working on cell salts for 40 years, tickling away. And I actually had it almost in a completed form. And I was often wondering what I was going to do with that. And then I thought, oh, well, there it is. It's just a study. It's just interesting study. And then, of course, Hauschka and Julius are these two Steiner people who have written books about chemistry. And so I sort of look at them and do a little bit of a thing with them, really. So that's just, a studies book, really. So we've got this picture. We've got this ability here to identify the energetic activity of what we're doing here, and therefore the next question is, sure, how do we collect this? And we've had a look at this, and with your boron, for example, I've done this. You can now. You can use whatever size circle you've got available to you. So you can actually, use a little 10 ml bottle or whatever on one of these circles, or you can blow it up to A1 or whatever you want. Or you can find circles in the environment. And that's what we were doing out over there before, was that if you go over there, you'll see that there's quite a defined circle sitting in the middle of the grass over there. And if you stand there, you can look out, and it's a 7 metre radius circle, quite big, just sitting right in the grass. Now, once you see these things, you can't unsee it. So, you guys that saw that, look around your property and just see where the circles are, and how many you've got.
In a break later on, we might all go out.
Yeah, for sure. Just have a look at it. But, we could walk around here and there'll be 20 circles just around. But it's also here, like we've made a circle here. Like I probably should put that sort of here, really, because, this sort of space here becomes a circle. And so that should be sitting sort of here in the middle, and it sort of grabs that bigger circle as an energy source and, back up, as it were. So
starting point, you've got your circle. Are you having an intent, or how are you starting the process, or is it just?
The main thinking process is here, working out what it is you want. What's the element that's going to be the manifestation of the activity you're wanting, and then it's literally just putting the bottle on the spot. Now, the best place to go from here is...
While you're looking, Glenn, I'm going
Yeah.
to expand upon a little bit what we heard from Glenn last year, was the question, what if I've got, this is great if we're at home, somewhere, but what if I've got 100 acres or 1,000 acres? How do I use this and expand it? And pull me up, Glenn, if I balls this up.
Right.
So, what Glenn said, we still use our circle, and we could start at a centre point, we're facing north, and we could imaginatively, and Glenn used things like pens, we could go out a half a metre. There's our second circle, so that circle's out there. Go another metre, there's our second, third circle, fourth, fifth and sixth circle. So we've still got the same what's on the ring of the cloth. And from here we just work out what point on this circle do we need whichever element we're looking for. Then we can put a 20 litre drum there,
Yeah.
or a 200 litre drum on this pipe.
The bigger the circle, the bigger the container that you can use. And we were saying out there, you know, I have a 6 metre circle at home, and I can use a 20 litre glass bottle of water that I put there, you know.
So the container is important, Glenn? The container? The
Oh,
material
glass.
container?
I use glass.
What about the intent of everyone in that around? Is that important also?
Well, you can't really control other people. I think your own intent is really important. And, you know, I said this to some friends and they said, oh, we don't bother doing that. We just pick the bottle up and go boron. There we go. And this quite, you know, good homeopathic friend of mine in America, in their conferences, that's what they're talking about, is that they just, you know, make the remedies just like that. They don't bother with anything. It's just sort of zip. So that's doable too. And as is, you know, I want boron on my property. You know, like thought is a formative force. But the big problem with that often is you are the active radiator. And so what I like about homeopathy is that we're getting the water to do the carrying. You know, I don't have to keep doing it. Because one of the deals with a radionics box is you turn that on and you're beaming that all over the show, but you turn that off and that stops. And there's plenty of examples of, you know, orchardists that have had somebody doing that and all of a sudden, you know, in come pests and, oh yeah, I turned it off because I had to do something else, you know. So it's all about me not being in it as much as possible. You know, let something else do it. I don't want to have to be always involved in that process. And so, you know, this is the point of the water, that this is, I think, coming from Emoto's work, who's this Japanese chap. I think he's died now. And so he was doing things like, you know, got the same water and give it somebody who sort of, you know, expressed love and somebody who expressed hate, and then they crystallised the water, and you're getting different, you know, different resonances showing up in the water. And so, you know, I guess that was the first real proof that water has memory, and because it's a crystal. And so it's a very, very special stuff, water. From what I understand is that all of chemical structures, the actual angle, you know, like the sodium and the chlorine, at a 90-degree angle. And that this is quite common with most molecules, is that they structure on this 90-degree angle, whereas with water, you've got oxygen, but you've got these two hydrogens off it, and that angle is 108 degrees. But this angle can change. That in the sort of different qualities of water, there's 4 states of water that they found now, that angle actually changes. So it's this very dynamic element that's been found to carry memory. And so there's now this woman in New Zealand, Veda Austin, who's sort of carrying this on, and she's finding that, she's now putting a bit of water in a petri dish, quite shallow, by her bed while she's sleeping. And then in the morning she gets up and just freezes that and comes back, and she's finding what was in her dreams is in the water. And so there's, she's doing all these lots of stuff, but basically what it's saying is water carries memory. And so the question then comes, what are we inputting into the water? So that's really our issue, is that we're trying to identify these different substances that we're going to put into the water, and then the water will do the carrying. And, we're 80% water. So we put that into us, then woof, it moves all through us. And this is how homeopathics work. And, once you're sensitive to these things, you only need 10 drops. And if I give a remedy to somebody, if I can't see them basically physically change within 10 minutes, I'm disappointed. Because people, the tension will drop out of their face, or something will happen that they just are different. And especially if you give them etherics drops, all of a sudden there's this sort of brighter, whiter light around them, and they're sort of, floating about a bit. And so these are really powerful things, is my experience. And we were talking in the break about, planting by the moon and all these sorts of things. And my answer is, well, if you have a look at how strong these preparations are and how they're moving plants around, that's heaps. So I tend to rely on the remedy to do it rather than all the other peripherals, which if you can fit those things into your practice, great. But, again, if you can't, and, there's this comment that a job is better done on the wrong day than not done on the right day. And, as farmers, you've got to do it when you've got to do it. And that's all there is to it, but it comes down to the strength and what we're putting into the water. And so, we've got enough of that proof now that that's what's sort of taking place. And so if I've got a lot of something, I tend to use it either 100% straight, or I can dilute that directly into some water and go and spray my half dozen plants or one plant. And, quite often do that. But if I want to specialise it into the roots or into the leaves or into the fruiting of the plant, that's where I use the homeopathic potentising. Now, Steiner in one of the medical lectures in 1921, lecture 11, he gave this picture that we have the nerve sense system, the rhythmic system, and the metabolic system, and he said that the potencies, 0 to 10 for the metabolic system, 10 to 20 for the rhythmic system, and 20 to 30 for the nerve sense system. And so, again, in the biodynamic literature, there's a whole bunch of different people saying a whole bunch of different things without really any science behind it whatsoever. And so, I follow this. Steiner said this, Vallada uses this, and I find it works. And so, that's why I potentise things, to direct them, to make them go further, sure, but to direct them to a certain place is really the point. And, the difference between a sparrow and a duck, you've got a duck being the problem, so that's where you're going to want to go to a metabolic potency. that picture that I gave yesterday where we have the duck being, quite a big-bodied bird, doesn't make much of a nest, has lots of young, they're ready to go straight away. That's metabolic, that's dominant here. Whereas the twitty birds that are small and fine colours, make a beautiful nest, only have two small birds that take a long time before they become independent. That's this nerve sense pole. So it's all of those indications, like rabbits, they have a lot of young. They're a metabolic being as well. I made that comment about possums being rhythmical. They just sort of live in this rhythm. And whereas I put rats and mice in this sphere up here, just because of that high nerve sense sort of deal going on. In some way, they do have quite a few young and this sort of thing, but, they're just that much more sort of nervy, and that has seemed to work for them. And the parts of the plant, the nerve sense is the here. So when we were doing those remedies for the phylloxera on grapes, we would have been wanting to bring the etheric into this process to push these insects out, but we would have been using one of these, let's say D25, because we wanted to get it into the soil. That's where the problem was. So we wanted to focus it there. And so that's how I use the potencies. And because there's only, 8 or 9 biodynamic preparations, I did do, of course, all of the 30 potencies and for every one of those. And so all of our biodynamic prep remedies are hand potentised remedies still. But once I came into chemistry, now we've got 120 of these things, I'm not going to do 30 bottles of each of those. And so this is where I, after being around Hugh for enough years and, got it, okay, radionics might work. And so I did a trial. At one point I had access to a glass house. And so I planted a row of lettuce and, and I treated this with my potentised preps, and I did that as the radionics preps, and the radionic preps grew better than these preps. Okay, there it is, it works. And so from that point I've, been more open to using radionic potentising. And so for these minerals, if I want to bulk them up and be more specific. So we've got this guy, we've got mites on feet. And so this is actually metabolic, you see. So we might potentise that up to D6 or something. Now, what is the real issue here is finding the potencies. Now, what Lily Kalisko did was that she would get wheat seeds and she would soak them, I think for like 12 hours, in whatever potency. So she'd have a range of potencies. This is actually 60 potencies here. And so she'd soak each one of those, put it in a bag and grow it until the second leaf is sort of mature. So just as the third leaf is coming, and then she'd pull them up and she'd measure the root and the first leaf and the second leaf. And she reckons that this is nerve sense, the first leaf is the rhythmic, and the second leaf is the metabolic. And so based upon the way those plants responded, she developed this graph. And this is what Rudolf Steiner referenced. And he was talking about, how you get a minimum. See here, whatever that is, that's 10, 20, or that's like D14 or something, that there's a negative here. And so here's your control. Well, that's your beginning, starts here. And so D1 is actually better than just by itself. And then these come back down. But this one's worse, you see? And so the point was that we did all these trials on the biodynamic preparations in 1992. And so we basically determined, well, that looks like a good one, doesn't it? You know? And because it creates this sort of, strong growth. Interesting, though, that the root is looks like it's a bit diminished there. So if we were wanting to be using a nerve sense, we'd be looking into the 30s, and you'd be saying, well, that one there is the best one for the root growth, that created the most root growth. So let's use that potency, which might be D28 or something like this. And so we did all those, and all of our biodynamic prep remedies are based upon those graphs that we used. However, once we come here, the question comes, well, okay, we've worked it out, we want nerve sense, we've worked it out that we've got to 20 to 30, now what? How are you going to work it out? So this is really the only thing that I dowse, and I use a simple dowsing system where I just use my finger and I determine the boundaries, yes, no, 20, 30, we want to use, what are we doing? Okay, holmium for a dog with mites. What do we want to use? I ask myself and I get D24. I ask myself and I just boop D24, and then I actually ask my finger, here's 20, here's 30, where are we going? And it's a little dip is what you feel, and it's around that 24 point. And at that point, okay, that's what I'll use. So that's really the extent of dowsing that I use in this process, just to determine the potency. And then I will, I have this, this is a Peter Romanoff, is it? Radionics machine. It's very simple. And this is a plate, so I'll just get a few drops onto that plate, and here's your dial, and he's got a sheet of paper here that says, D24 is something. It's about 241 or something like that. And so you just dial that up in this dial, 241, and then you just turn it on. Now, what I understand is happening here is that there is a circuit in here. And in a sense, it's like a crystal set, you know. And all we're doing with this is we're just adjusting the sort of vibe, like in a radio. But this is running off the Earth's magnetic field. We've put a circuit into the Earth's magnetic field, and that's the actual driving force of this. There's a whole bunch of radionics machines that actually do have power into them. This one seems to be okay. And the other thing that we've got here, of course, is we've got this little extender that we can put in here. And you have your bottle or your 200 litre drum or whatever you do, and you just drop that thing in there, and this will then potentise your 200 litres of whatever you got. So that's what I do for this stuff, because as I say, I'm not doing hundreds of bottles. So there you go, and free. That's the best part of it all.
What's it called?
Oh, it's a radionics box. Now, they call it a, where's my glasses? They call it a multi-potency simulation master model. Prue Instruments is the company, and this guy died. Funnily enough, a lot of radionics people die of cancer, as this guy did. But I understand his son or his stepson or something is in Cairns, and he's making these. And it's like $700 or something like that, which is quite cheap. I bought one of Hugh Lovell's boxes, which cost $5,000. But what Hugh's got is a invert button, and so whatever you put on that plate, this will give you the opposite vibe. And so I'm using that for weed control at the moment. And so I just collect up some weeds. I use his thing that has these sort of channels, put it in there. And so you're applying the opposite vibe to the plants. And so far, so good. We had cooch coming over into a beds, quite active cooch, and basically one application. And yes, the cooch is there, but it's going nowhere. It's not causing any trouble. It's not sort of dominating the whole place, you know. I did convolvulus. Again, we had a patch. And, you know, you've got to have a problem to be able to solve the problem. And so, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, I saw I had a bit of convolvulus, so I had to let it grow, you know. So sort of get it out of, you know, it moved. And so now I can solve the problem. And so last year I did convolvulus, and this year, yes, there was a bit of convolvulus there, but they weren't those great big fat runners or anything. They were just these weedy little fellows that were sort of sitting there. And so, you know, literally you'd say you don't have a convolvulus problem because, you know, it's not really causing a problem. Yes, you can find convolvulus, but it's not actually going anywhere. And I would expect that in the future you won't find convolvulus there. I've just done Wandering Jew. Yep.
How does the potentizing work if you say you've made up your small bottle of 10, 20, whatever you made, and you want to use that? Say you either want to dilute that and spray it. Is it then not a 20? Or like if you want to put in a water trough to treat worms in an animal, then it's sort of not 20 anymore? Like
Yes, it is.
How does that work?
It's well, you're not. So the other part of this story, which we probably need to also show you, is the physical potentizing process, and that's where we're okay. We've collected this, and we've got 10 mils in here. Let's do it, I guess. So I'll just have to. Maybe we'll leave that to the next session because I've got to prepare it a bit. But basically, you're just getting your 10 mils and you're putting it in with 90 mils of water, and you're shaking that for 2.5 minutes. So it's called rhythmic dilution, and it's this rhythm. So I actually do have a clock that's ticking away 1 second at a time. Now, I use it as a reference. I don't want to sit there and watch it and sort of do this, you know. It's just that I try and relax, I try and keep that rhythm going, and I just check that I'm on, because it's really easy to start doing that, especially little bottles. You just start doing this, you know, instead of going like that, you start. Yeah, so you know, that's just convenient because it does actually work that way, and a second works and a second's on the clock and all that. You can do whatever you like, but that's just easy. And so I just check that I'm keeping the rhythm going. And of course, the clock, you do it for 2.5 minutes. And someone did the math, that's 1/24 of 1/24 of an hour, something like that, you know, of a day. And but that's what Lenny Kalisko and the Steiner people tend to use. And so that's your first potency. Now, but what's happening in the bottle? You know, every time you do that, you're creating a vortex, you know. So you're creating, I understand, in the vortex, you create a vacuum. And that within a vacuum, the water molecule expands. And that's when whatever you're wanting to put in gets in there, and then it collapses. And this is what you're doing with your stirring. It's a potentizing, it's a really cumbersome potentizing process. But it's this expansion and contraction of this water molecule that's, you know, moving, that's bringing, you know, causing the memory really. And so, okay, I find I really need the clock to get the 2.5 minutes, because sometimes, you know, it's like a minute's gone, and it's 2.5 minutes. Other times it's like, wow, we've been doing this for a bloody long time, and you only done 1.5 minutes. So you can't rely on your perception of time with potentising. It's really quite strange. It really warps, funnily enough, you know. So yeah, you just keep that 2.5 minutes, and then you're going to do the same next time. You're going to get 10 mils of that to 90 mils of that, and you just do that again, and then you just do that again. So once I've done that, I try not to disturb it particularly much. But of course, once I've got it in the bottle and it's on the courier and it's trucked across the country and, you know, God only knows. But the thing is, the product works, does the job. So it's okay, you know. So that's where it's stable, is probably my answer to you, is that...
But you could say, if you wanted, say you decided the blood-sucking bug in a goat is going to take a 20 or something.
Right.
You could put a certain amount of 20 in a 200-litre water container and let them drink it.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, what is your dilution rate?
Are you letting them drink it, or like which is better, drinking it or spraying it over them?
Whatever's easiest.